Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered. Johnny Rivers remembers Elvis. So we're back on the Circle G Ranch. We've been here for quite a few episodes. So if you've missed any of those in the past, be sure to check those out after this video. But every video in the series is standalone. You don't need to have seen any prior in order to enjoy any video in the series. Hi Keith, thank you so much for coming. Hi Pat, thank you for coming. Hi Marion, thank you for coming. I appreciate seeing you all here. We're going to start today with words from the song Hey Hey Hey, which was recorded for the film Clam Bake by Elvis Presley on February 23rd, 1967. And these words are: work the sandpaper, hammer that nail, tote that paintbrush, and lift that pail. And those are words that may have been familiar to Elvis around this time. He had personally renovated the barn on the Graceland Estates, according to several different sources. He'd helped do things like hammer nails and paint, so he must have used some sandpaper and lifted some pails. And he was supervising all the work that was being done on the Circle G Ranch right at this moment in time. Hi Regina, thank you so much for coming. Hi Angie, thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you both here. And we're going to start today by remembering the cross that Elvis saw on the hill at dawn that started all this off with a song that I wrote entitled Cross on the Circle.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, "It's a good omen, and a dream again." At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain. White as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trials and porch light rides. He handpicked hard to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land, it's grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we hear the memories of Johnny Rivers. And yesterday, from the archive, emerged a scrapbook. And I didn't really tell the story of where the article, the newspaper article that we looked at yesterday came from. We saw that it came from a London newspaper about the music industry. But I found it because somebody a long time ago, probably around the time it was published, cut that article out. And they put it into a scrapbook with a whole bunch of other Elvis clippings from various publications. And then I happened to see a picture of this scrapbook, and the picture was good enough that I could make out the article. And that's how we're getting this article today. So it kind of like showed itself to me. I didn't really find it so much as it jumped out. And that particular article, that clipping, it was a double article, and it had two articles. And yesterday we looked at one, and it was from a neighbor of Elvis, a Mrs. Rutherford, and she told us things about Elvis, almost all of which turned out to be true. And Regina, yes, our Regina here in the chats, Hillbilly Cat History, she was able to confirm that a story that we heard, that Gladys, while she was sick in the hospital at the very end of her life, she requested that the pink Cadillac that Elvis had given her be parked in the parking lot in such a way that she could see it from the window of her hospital room. And Regina found comments about it in the book Elvis and Gladys by Elaine Dundee, one of the very, very early books, academic books about Elvis. If you've never read it, it's a great read. But in that book, Elaine refers to a story, a newspaper article in which Elvis told that story. I haven't tracked down a newspaper article yet. Hopefully, maybe someday we will, now that we know that it's out there, and that we were alerted to it through this article that we looked at together yesterday, that came out of a scrapbook that a fan kept way back in the 1960s. And so let's look at the second part of that article. Which it's up on in our view now. And it says 2 word pictures of Elvis. Well, the first word picture, that was the neighbor. And now we're going to hear from a man named Johnny Rivers. And the title of this article is Johnny Rivers Knows the Sporty Elvis. Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And the article says, the man called the best handled myth in the world is once more back in the NME Top 20 with Indescribably Blue, Elvis Aaron Presley. Someone on football playing terms with Presley in the U.S., pop star Johnny Rivers, at present in Britain promoting his new single, Baby, I Need Your Lovin'. He was able to paint a more palatable picture of the living legend when I visited Johnny in his Dorchester hotel room. So the journalist for this newspaper he's been able to secure an interview with U.S. pop star Johnny Rivers. Now, I'm not overly familiar with Johnny Rivers myself. Can't say that name is ringing any bells with me. Or the single, Baby, I Need Your Loving. So maybe I'll go out there and find that single for us, and I'll put it on one of our playlists. Which reminds me, I've made a new playlist. I'll put a link to it here in the chat later on during the broadcast, but you can find that same link in the description below the video. This playlist is the Circle G playlist, and it has songs that Elvis either released or recorded while he owned the Circle G. Songs that we've been talking about in these stories. I've also included The Green, Green Grass of Home by both Elvis and Tom Jones, because that was the song that Elvis requested George Klein play over and over on the radio as Elvis and the guys drove home from Hollywood to Memphis for Christmas 1966. You know, they arrived just before Thanksgiving. So there is another playlist, and it's my original music mixed with rare Elvis tracks. Now, this new playlist, the Circle G, it has my songs that are about the Circle G also mixed in there. And that both playlists are going to grow as we move along. But the Circle G will be all about 1967, really. Things that are happening or released or recorded, things that are on Elvis's mind, and then our reflections through my songs on that time period in this new playlist. And you can find that below, and I'll put up a link to it in a little bit. But we've also learned here that Johnny knows Elvis and has played football with him. So Elvis loves to play touch football, and he gathers his guys and various other people that live in Hollywood, and they play together this touch football. So Ricky Nelson was one of those guys, the son of Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, and he was a child star on the Ozzie and Harriet television show. And he really loved Elvis. And Elvis inspired him while he was on that television show to begin his own rock and roll career. And of course, he had the backing of his father and mother, who were show business professionals, had always been in show business, knew all the tricks. Ozzy, he was a very talented producer and businessman, very good at the television and entertainment industry. So they launched Ricky's career, and he was a famous rock and roll guy on his own. But for a time period, he was out here playing touch football in Hollywood with Elvis Presley. Another guy who used to play out there was Max Baer. And that's the guy who played Jethro Bodine on the Beverly Hillbillies, which was a sitcom in this time period. Jethro Bodine or Max Baer, Max Baer Jr., I believe was his name. He was a very tall, very good-looking guy. Also kept his hair in a very Elvis-type haircut from this period. And he played touch football out here with these other guys. And here's another one of them, Johnny Rivers. And here's what Johnny Rivers has to say. Presley now spends his whole life commuting between Hollywood and Memphis and that huge house bus of his. He has this vehicle fitted out with everything from a kitchen to a bedroom, and he likes to drive the monster himself. He has a house which he leases in Hollywood while he makes films. The rest of the time, he spends at his own Gracelands near Memphis. We talked yesterday about how whoever wrote this article replaced the word Graceland with Gracelands with an S, which is, they also changed all the spellings of the words to British spellings. And in yesterday's article, they abbreviated Elvis's name as ELL, which is not something that people who knew him called him. But we've also learned that he has this giant house bus, or it's a big Dodge motorhome, is what I believe that Johnny's referring to. And I'm sure it does have a kitchen in it. Almost all motorhomes do. And it's probably got a bedroom. All motorhomes do. And it is a monster when Johnny says he likes to drive the monster himself. And that's true. Elvis liked to drive big vehicles. Elvis liked to drive all vehicles. It didn't matter what the vehicle was. Elvis wanted to try it out. And he didn't always like them or always stick with them. But he liked to try them all. And talking about vehicles, Johnny Rivers says he's still a motorbike fanatic. And the last occasion on which I saw him, a couple of months ago, he came up alongside me on Sunset Strip, wearing his all-white leathers. We just rode along for a while slowly. Then he shot off into the distance. Now, I didn't know that Elvis wore all white leathers at any point when he was riding. I knew that he had some black ones, some darker ones, but Johnny says he's got all white ones, which is like a precursor, like a Ford Echo of the jumpsuits that he would wear on stage in the 1970s. Those weren't made out of leather necessarily, but it's also the inversion of the 1968 black leather comeback special outfit, which is one of his best known looks, one of his most famous looks. But just before that, he was wearing all white. And so this period, this moment in time when Johnny saw him, it must have been, when he's saying a couple of months ago, we've got to be talking about somewhere in September, October, November 1966, which makes sense. We know he was in Hollywood prior to Thanksgiving, because it's on that trip home that they asked George Klein to play Green, Green Grass at Home over and over. And Anna says that she did not know about the white leather either. It's an interesting image, though, right, Anna? Wish somebody had taken a picture of it. Hi, Debbie. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And Johnny Rivers has more to tell us about motorcycles. He says, apparently, Elvis passed a motorbike dealer in Memphis recently where they had an outdoor display of 14 Triumphs and Hondas. Elvis went inside and asked the guy, how much are they? And the guy asked, you mean each one? And Elvis says, the lot. The amazed dealer gave him a number. Elvis nodded. And he brought out a roll of money, and he bought every one. He had the motorcycle sent to his house, where he gave one to each of his retinue. Then he roared around the countryside. Presley has so much money, he doesn't know where to spend it next. I can't somehow see him coming to Britain. because he would have no reason. His records still make the charts, and he has all he wants in the U.S. He does virtually no personal appearances now, but works quite a bit for charity. He opened a boys' club in Memphis recently. So Elvis bought every motorcycle in the shop, but he also opened a boys' club in Memphis. And from the outside looking in, Johnny Rivers is seeing that Elvis has so much money, just can't get rid of it all fast enough. Now, I don't think that's the same perspective that Vernon would have on the situation. It might be the same perspective that Elvis has on it, but not Vernon. And that's the end of this article. So we know that from previous stories that Elvis went on a Lear jet on February 21st to Nashville, and he recorded 4 songs for Clambake. And on the way back, Elvis talked the pilot into doing circles around the Circle G so that he could get a look at the property, at least according to Gary Pepper. And we've also heard that that jet was owned by the guy who started the Holiday Inn, and who was also a friend of Sam Phillips, the man who recorded Elvis Presley first. Now, there's some wiggle room within this story that we weren't aware of, but that we're about to become aware of. And so this wiggle room is that, yes, Elvis did go to Nashville on February 21st, and he did record 4 songs. And those 4 songs are The Girl I Never Loved, How Can You Lose What You Never Had, You Don't Know Me, the movie version, and A House That Has Everything. And these were recorded in RCA Studio B in Nashville, Tennessee. And then Elvis took the jet back, and I believe this is the day that he got the aerial tour of the Circle G. And this is the day that Gary identifies a Lear jet. Now, a Lear jet is a very special jet. It's not just any old jet. It's very expensive at the time, even for a jet. And it makes sense to me that it might be owned by the guy who owns Holiday Inn. But there was another reference to a commercial flight. And it also makes sense to me that it might be a very high-priced chartered commercial flight. I think that was it, the word chartered, not commercial, but chartered flight. But the deal is that Elvis recorded these 4 songs, and those aren't enough. That's not the whole soundtrack. You can't sell just 4 songs. So there need to be more songs. So there was a scheduled second night, February 22nd, next night. But Elvis has already flown home. Of course, Elvis is a rich man. He can fly in again. But he doesn't want to go. Now, February 22nd is also the same day that the deed for the Circle G Ranch is filed. Now, I'm sure Elvis doesn't do that himself. But I find the the connection between the dates to be significant. This is a day that Elvis's dream of owning this ranch is finalizing, the day when he can begin to move forward at 100% with whatever his plans are for the ranch. But he's supposed to be over here in Nashville recording these songs. So on the second night, he refuses to go into the studio to record. So Red West goes in at Elvis's request, and he records the reference vocals, because Elvis, he is throwing a tantrum of some kind. It's a very controlled tantrum, though. I believe he's sending a message to someone. We haven't gotten enough information out here yet, at least not within this program, to make a determination on exactly what he's thinking at this moment, or what he's trying to accomplish. But no matter what he's trying to accomplish, he also does not want the studio musicians and the others who are involved with being paid to be there for his recording time to suffer. So he sends in Red so they all get paid. And Red is actually a decent singer, and he records the reference vocals. This is the same way that Elvis records a lot of his songs. Someone writes them. They then have someone else, not usually themselves. Usually the writers are not the singers. Occasionally they are. But in this period of time, that's rare. Bob Dylan is a giant rarity. But soon Bob Dylan is copied by virtually everyone, and everyone becomes a singer-songwriter. They're also following the example of the Beatles. But prior to that, most people really didn't write their own songs. They were written, and the writers weren't really great musicians in most cases on a performance basis. So they would have other musicians, usually musicians who were trying to make it into fame and fortune on their own, or working musicians, people who, taught lessons to kids, did some studio time, maybe were connected to a band that played locally in the area, things like that. They would record these songs and they would send them to Elvis, and then Elvis would listen to them, pick out the ones that he wanted to try to record on his own, and often used those performances as inspiration for his own performances. So in this case, because this song's written for the movies, didn't come in from an outside source into one of his publishing houses. It's written directly for him. Don't have any reference tracks, don't need them. He's going to interpret it on his own from basically what's going on in the studio at the time. They might have a really rough reference track, but he sends Red in there to do it the way he'd do it. And that's what Red does. And so now all of the tracks are down, the instrument tracks, and Elvis doesn't necessarily need to go back into that studio to finish this. He could now go to any studio and just record his part, because all of the other parts are already done. And they'll just replace Red's voice with his. And Debbie's saying that she finds these stories so fascinating. Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate that. And Keith says that Red wrote some nice songs for Elvis. He did. And Marion says that she never thought of learning so much after being a fan for so many years. I appreciate that too, Marion. Pat says she's learning a lot. Thank you so much, Pat. I know all of you have been fans for a long time, so it means a lot to me that you're finding new things and value in these broadcasts. Regina says that she's also learning a lot of new stuff. Thank you so much, guys. So now Red has recorded these tracks for Elvis. And on February 23rd, the next night, the third night, well, there's another night of recording that was already scheduled. They scheduled 3 nights. Kind of the thinking was Elvis would hit it in 2. They wouldn't need a third. But Felton Jarvis, the guy who's producing all this, he's good about making sure there's plenty of time scheduled. And he knows that Elvis, he needs to be in the moment in order to get the right recordings. But Elvis is really supposed to be recording these things in Hollywood. This is for a movie. It's not supposed to be Studio B in Nashville anyway. This is already a deal he pushed for because he didn't want to go back to Hollywood. But now he's not come on that second night. And Felton knows he can't really push Elvis. I mean, what can he do? Just make him mad. And he's not going to come in and he's not going to finish. And they need him to finish. And I'm saying Felton, it may not be Felton on this particular project. I'm going to need to check that, guys. Because I haven't pulled all the source for this. We're going to re-dive into this again. Because it's a really important piece. But we need to get an idea of what happened first. So that then we can spiral in like we have on all of our other stories. These really important pieces. So there's a third night. And Elvis goes in for this third night. And that must mean he has to fly back to Nashville. Unless he stayed in Nashville. So this is the part that we're going to need to know more about. But it appears that maybe he took another flight. And that might have been the same jet. Might have been a different one. So that opens the story up that maybe he took a Learjet this time, and then he took a jet that was, or a plane that was owned by the guy who owns the Holiday Inns, who started the Holiday Inn on the second time. We don't know, but it's now possible that both of these stories could individually and simultaneously be true, or they could all be details of the same night, the same story, or it could be the same story repeated for both nights, right? Because maybe he just did the same thing again. We don't know at this point. But we do know that he went in on February 23rd and he overdubbed Red West reference vocals from the previous night, same studio, RCA Studio B. And this time he recorded 3 tracks, and one is Hey Hey Hey, and one is Clam Bake, and one is a reprise of Clam Bake, which is its own song. It's something they were doing, I think, that works into the movie when they put the different pieces into the movie. And again, all of those songs are available in that playlist that I referenced. And let me go ahead and drop that in the chat. And I see there's some chat I want to review. This gives me a good chance for it. So I've dropped this link in if you guys want that for the playlist and hear some of these songs we're talking about. Debbie says that I'm an excellent teacher. Thank you so much, Debbie. And Angie says that her friend dated Felton Jarvis. That's fascinating, Angie. So you probably have some great pictures of Felton Jarvis that we've never seen. Or your friend does, maybe. And maybe some very interesting stories. I bet he told her a lot of stories about Elvis. That'd be very interesting to know. For 2 years, she dated Felton. That's neat. So now we've actually made it all the way back to the Circle G Ranch. Whatever Elvis did on those 3 days, he's managed to get back to Memphis. He's made it back to the ranch. And now we can hear from Becky Yancey, who is his secretary at this time. She's known Elvis since she was 14, when she saw him performing on the back of a flatbed truck at the opening of the shopping center that had Cat's drugstore. Marty Lacker was there, who was Elvis's high school friend, and Johnny Cash, although Becky didn't know it. And later on, Becky asked Elvis for a job, and he gave her a job as a secretary. And Becky worked with Vernon out in the office. And she said, Priscilla let us, referring to herself and her husband, she'd gone on a tour of the Circle G with Priscilla not long after they bought it. So it was probably sometime in February. And maybe it was on the days that Elvis was off in Nashville recording his songs, because he wouldn't have been there that day. Although I'm going to take that back, because she makes a reference to Elvis, I think, later in the story. But I think it's a good chance it was February or March. So Becky says, Priscilla led us from the back of the house to a new luxury mobile home that she and Elvis planned to live in. So that kind of dates it for us right there. Although we don't really know exactly when this house got there, when this trailer got there. I've seen some evidence that it was ordered in early March and it was in place by the end of March. So that would indicate this happened near the end of March, because they're not actually living in there yet. And Becky's saying that Priscilla's indicating this mobile home is for Elvis and her. Now, we've heard other stories that it was bought for Alan and his wife. So now it's not clear whether Alan and his wife ever lived in it at all, or if maybe it was said this is going to be for Alan and his wife, and then it was almost immediately changed to it will be for Elvis and Priscilla. But Becky's looking at this mobile home before anyone's in it, because they're planning to live in it. And Becky says workmen were already busy arranging it to the owner's taste. New carpeting had been installed and the original furniture replaced. A king-size bed and an electric fireplace were installed. I've never seen another mobile home like it. The rooms were huge, and there were enormous windows at the front. Priscilla was delighted with it. So we've got a lot more details here that it appears that Elvis has bought this trailer, and it's got to be brand new, because he went straight to the brand new lots and bought them. Although I guess it's possible he bought used trailers on the lots, but that doesn't sound like Elvis. Although he did occasionally dabble in used cars and such, if it struck his fancy, so I don't know. I would think most likely this is a brand new trailer. And they're saying that new carpeting's already been installed. So Elvis bought it, it's already got this new stuff in it, and he immediately has it remodeled into newer Elvis type stuff. I just find that to be a really interesting detail. And that he's got the electric fireplace. When I was a kid in the late 70s, I was very young, but I remember everybody had an electric fireplace. And it fell out of fashion, I think, into the early 80s. But prior to that, we didn't have a whole lot of money. We were very well off, I would say, but even we had an electric fireplace with flickering electric logs. So it was a big thing, at least to me in the circles I was in as a 5-year-old. whatever houses my parents took me to, whoever they were hanging out with. And these were all regular houses, as I remember. All of them had a fake electric fireplace. So I think that was something that in the late 60s and early 70s really took off. I don't know if any of you have memories of that. Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much for coming. I hope you feel better soon. And Gary Pepper says, somebody had asked him, does Elvis occupy the small house located on the ranch, which is the cottage? And he says, no, he turned the home over to Alan Fortas and his wife to occupy for the time being because Alan's father died recently, and Alan is unable to leave Memphis for a while as his mother wants him to help her look after her personal affairs. And so Alan and his wife, Jo, will stay there, and Alan will be his ranch manager while Elvis is away working on his films. And Marion saying that her neighbors had an electric fireplace that was never warm. That's the ones I'm talking about, Marion. They were just flickering lights in the 70s. They didn't put out any warmth. I think you could buy them today, and they do. They're actually a heater as well. But these were just decoration. And so here we've had Gary Pepper confirm that Alan Fortas and Jo Fortas, his wife, they're living in the cottage. But it's still not clear whether they ever lived in the trailer at all. But it appears, based on Becky's testimony, they never did. And Lamar Fike says Elvis had something in his hand all the time. Billy says it was from nerves. I don't know. But I do know that when he was down there at the ranch, he ate whatever he wanted. Hamburgers, steaks, and all kinds of stuff that put weight on him. And he started blowing up in January and February of 1967. And he had this movie, Clam Bake, to do in March. I couldn't believe how big he got. Now that's kind of a funny statement from Lamar, because Lamar is a very large individual. And he was often the butt of the guy's jokes about his weight. But here, he gets to put a dig in at Elvis that he couldn't believe how big he got. But at the same time, he's giving us an emotional truth that Elvis was not as thin as he is at his fighting weight. Right? He wasn't in shape to do this movie. His body was reflecting what his spirit was saying. That this wasn't the time to be filmed. Especially not in this particular film. At least not for him. Now the other interesting thing here is the food that Lamar indicates. And he only gives us two kinds. And he says hamburgers and steaks. Now we heard steaks yesterday from Mrs. Rutherford, who said that Elvis liked to eat steaks. Now, almost everything I've ever read about Elvis says that he did not like to eat steaks, that he occasionally ate a steak, but that he preferred hamburger, and steak was not his thing. However, they are doing all the cookouts and everything, because they're living this ranch lifestyle. So it's possible maybe he's really into steaks at this moment. And maybe it's possible that's what Mrs. Rutherford was somehow referring to. That it's going around that Elvis is really into steaks right now. I don't know how on the moment the rumors were in Memphis about what Elvis's eating habits were. They might have been like right on it. Because those fans, they might have been able to see some of the things that went in and out of the house. When they got unloaded from the cars and such. I don't know. But it's just interesting to note that in these two different accounts about the same time period, steaks are mentioned, and that's just not really a usual Elvis food item. And Keith is asking, did the Colonel have some comments about his hair or weight? Well, the Colonel's not around, right? So he doesn't see his weight. Nobody sees his weight until he shows up and reports for duty. And at that moment, the director is very unhappy. Mostly because he's meeting him. I believe he's meeting him in the costume department. And the costumer is saying, these costumes we have, we're going to need to make some alterations, and that's going to take some time. So remember, we're already into a movie that's already delayed. So now we've got to delay again to get these costumes ready. And the fact that this is being brought to Elvis's attention at that moment, well, he is a professional. And he's not extremely happy about being filmed, knowing that he looks he's enough overweight that the costumes have to be changed. Right? So I think it's an eye-opening moment for Elvis himself. And he goes to work at losing weight. So there's there's possibly going to be more delays for more costume shrinkage, but that'll be okay with the director because he'll be looking better. But that's a story that we're going to be getting into. That just gives you a taste of what's about to happen. He's heavy when he shows up. Heavy enough that it causes problems. And then, of course, that gets back to the Colonel. And it's not back in the sense that somebody reported to him. Colonel's there. I mean, he's very involved in these operations. So once a hitch comes up, he knows immediately. But there'll be something else that happens that takes all their minds off Elvis's weight. Won't be a problem at all after that. They'll have all kinds of new things to be angry about. That's coming up. So on the 23rd, Elvis recorded those songs that we looked at. And then on the 26th, which is 3 days later and a Sunday, so it's not even a full week later, this is the day that Elvis meets Dr. Nick. They got to bring Dr. Nick out on this day in order to treat Elvis. So Elvis, earlier that week, spent at least 2 days recording songs for Clambake and spent a day in between probably seething or maybe depressed or upset or maybe excited that he was finalizing the Circle G purchase, or maybe all of those feelings during that day. And he's also spending a massive amount of time on his horse because he's got these saddle sores. We know he's spending time on the horse because it's showing up on his rear end. And he's got to call in a professional, Dr. Nick. And Dr. Nick is such a wonderful individual, so caring. He listens to Elvis. And then Elvis, I don't know that Elvis had a plan to ask Dr. Nick to write a letter that would give him a medical excuse not to go. I feel almost like that came up in the moment. But it's possible that Elvis already had that in mind when he brought Dr. Nick out. And if that's true that he had it in mind, it makes you wonder if he got the saddle sores on purpose. Like it started to rub him raw and he thought, I'm just going to do this so that till it's so raw that I got to call in a doctor. I don't think Elvis did that. And that's why I lean towards thinking that Elvis, he was testing Dr. Nick, and Dr. Nick passed so well in Elvis's estimation that he thought, I've got to ask him for this now because I need this time. I just can't go back. And Nancy's saying, real quick, everyone hit that like button. And she's right. Everybody should hit that like button if you've learned anything today. Make sure that you subscribe and that you've turned the notifications on so that you've got the best chance of knowing when I'm on live. And tell everybody you know that loves Elvis Presley all about Hillbilly Cat history so they can join us here and they can explore the archive on their own. I've got a lot of shorts, a lot of videos. We've got over 20 hours of live stream archive just on Circle G. Got a lot of live stream about the mystery of August 16th, 1977. We've looked at a lot of original documents from the beginning of Elvis's life together. The first 12 or 15 videos I ever put out trace Gladys Presley's early life. So if you're into any of that, make sure that you visit the channel, Hillbilly Cat History, and bring everybody you know that loves Elvis. And we move on from February 26th, the Sunday, to Tuesday, February 28th. So on the 26th, Elvis met Dr. Nick. On Monday, the 27th, Dr. Nick came to Graceland, and he gave Elvis a copy of the letter that he had sent to Colonel Parker. And it wasn't about getting Elvis out of hock with Colonel Parker. Elvis can't be in trouble with Colonel Parker. Colonel Parker works for Elvis. Elvis doesn't work for Colonel Parker. That gets confused in a lot of stories. People think that Colonel Parker had some hold over Elvis for something. Colonel Parker's an old man. Now, he's a genius at marketing. And he's an ambitious person. And he is conniving, but ultimately, he is an old man. Elvis is a young, vibrant, active individual. Elvis is not trapped by the Colonel. He's trapped by the contracts that he himself has agreed to do. And he reaped the benefits of those contracts early on because they were all front-loaded for Elvis and the Colonel's benefit. That's the way Colonel structured the contracts. Elvis is at the end of this contract cycle. It's not as fun to be at the end of the contract cycle as it is to be at the front. That's part of what's happening. Another part of what's happening is when you're at the end of a contract cycle, there's no guarantees about the future. So you don't have to come back to doing this. You don't have to recontract into it. But if you don't recontract, or if for some reason they don't want to recontract with you, then the future's open. And that can be both wonderful and terrifying. And so he's resetting himself here on the ranch. And he's coming up with what is it that he really wants to do? Does he want to go back and do more of these movies? He knows he doesn't want to do that. He knows it, but he knows that if he can't think of something better, if he can't make another decision, he has to do this in order to keep the money rolling. Now, Clambake not the end of the contracts, it's just towards the end. And so he sees the end coming. He knows that it's coming. He's delaying this going back to Clambake. The Colonel's probably not very happy. And the Colonel's now got work to do. He's got to go out and smooth everything over. That's what Dr. Nick does. Gives him the letter. The letter is the smoother. Colonel can now go out there and say, this is nobody's fault. We've got a medical issue. Yes, there's already been delays, but now we've got a medical issue. So we've got to delay again. But everybody remain confident Elvis is coming to make the movie. So that's what happens on Monday. the colonel gets the ammunition he needs to be able to make this time that Elvis needs available. Because without this, they don't have a contract leg to stand on. And on Tuesday, February 28th, Colonel Parker sends a letter to Marty Lacker regarding Elvis and Marty's consumption of pharmaceuticals, and effectively relieves Marty in that letter of co-foreman duties. Joe Esposito and Marty Lacker at this time are co-foremen, and they describe that as somebody has to write the checks, somebody has to do the paperwork, somebody has to coordinate who's doing what to tell Elvis what's being done. You know, so they're more like a point of contact for all the guys. The guys call and say, hey, I did this and that and this. Let Elvis know. They don't so much assign jobs. Now, if Elvis has said, let somebody know I want him to do this, well, they do that. But this letter that comes on Tuesday might be an indication from the colonel that he sees that there's more going on here than just that Elvis has a medical issue, and that he's linking it directly back to Marty. And he's saying that Marty is making errors. We don't know what those errors are. We don't see that he said that, but that's why you relieve people of duties. And he's linking it to this consumption of drugs. And Marty, admittedly, in his own book, you know, he admits that he did have drug issues, that they were using, specifically amphetamines at this time was really Marty's problem. Marty had an issue with amphetamines. Now, this reference is from Peter Guralnick. So I assume this letter is real. I don't have a copy of the letter. Would love to see it. Peter just put out a brand new book, and it's full of letters from the colonel. I haven't seen it yet. So it's possible this letter's in there. But he references this letter in a previous book. And this is the show, Signed, Sealed, Remembered, where we're talking about documents. So it fits in perfectly with our show. I just don't have anything specifically to show you. And now we're back on this slide that we've been looking at for a long time. And I was asked about what Jerry Schilling says, that late one night, Sandy and I were in our trailer during a rainstorm. And there was Elvis, standing in the pouring rain, looking confused and disheveled, holding a loaf of bread. And he said, Jerry, I need you to come with me. And I teased you guys 2 days ago that I was going to tell you this story. But we didn't make it again because we're at the end of the episode. So I'm going to tease you one more time. And we are going to tell this story. And I promise it's going to be in the next episode. We're absolutely going to tell this story in the next episode. Because we're there. We need to know about this letter that the colonel has sent. Obviously, there are some kind of pharmaceutical things going on. And Jerry's going to tell us about them in this story. And it's not a fun story. It's not a Elvis Looks Great story. It's, this is what Jerry is saying really happened at this point in time. Or I believe he's pinpointing this point in time at the ranch, the period before they went to do Clambake. But before I leave you guys today, I'm going to give you another song. And this one is about the dreams that Elvis had for Circle G and what he was dreaming when he started to build it and put it together, and why he might have been so happy on February 22nd when all the paperwork went through and he was told once and for all, it's really yours, Elvis. This is called Circle G Dreams. And all of you keep on taking care of business.
I drew a line in the dirt, said this land could be yours. 1 acre each, a house, a porch, a door. I saw the light in their eyes, like stars in the dust. But the paper stayed blank, and the dream gathered rust. I wasn't cash poor, I was rich in belief, trying to carve out a kingdom beneath the cotton clouds and the Mississippi sun. But every time I reached, the dream came undone. Don't you forget what I tried to make, a home for the hearts I refused to forsake. They called it a whim, they called it a waste, but I saw a commune, not just empty space. Don't you forget me when the fences arise, when the ranch house fades and the silence lies. I gave you the downbeat, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my hand. They said zoning laws, they said legal red tape, but I saw a chapel in every landscape, a replica of Graceland, a circle of trust. But the curl was bust, and the dream turned to dust. I signed the checks, I made the calls, watched the trailers roll in like prayer stalls. But Vernon's face, tight as a gate, held back the flood of what I tried to create. Don't you forget what I tried to give, a place where my people could finally live. They called it a farm, they called it a phase, but I saw a future in the ranch's haze. Don't you forget me when the lights go out, when the house plans fade and the voices doubt. I gave you the downbeat, I gave you the land, but the kingdom never built still lives in my home. Still lives in my hand. Still lives in my hand.